Our next topic will be moving beyond the product and exploring how we can leverage customer experience to drive retention. And for that, I need Adham Kassab, CEO at Selfapy. Hello. Hamish Grierson, CEO and co-founder at Thriva. And of course, the panel moderator, Klaus Boehncke, Global Digital Health Lead at L.E.K Consulting. Welcome, gentlemen, to the stage. We just need 5 seconds to set up everything. And I'm giving you the microphone. Enjoy the discussion.
Thank you very much. And we can see the timer running there.
Yes, it includes also Q&A session.
Includes the Q&A session. So we have 25 minutes for the panel.
Yes, just if you could please leave 5 or 7 minutes for the Q&A session. If there will be no questions, we can discuss longer. Okay, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for attending. And thank you to Adham and Hamish, my fellow panelists. We were supposed to have also Chris from Salesforce here today. Unfortunately, he had a personal tragedy in his family and couldn't make it. So it's almost like a more intimate fireside chat than a big panel here. The topic is, as you can see, beyond the product, leveraging customer experience to drive retention. And I think some would also say that customer experience actually is the product. I remember Steve Jobs, he used to say, design isn't what a product looks like, a design is how it works. So I actually think customer experience is an integral part of the product. It's not, something different. So let's start off by a little bit of introduction. I think it'd be great, maybe Hamish, you want to start, say a few words about yourself and about the company that you represent here today.
Thanks, Klaus. Yeah, and thank you everyone for coming along for this one. My name's Hamish. I'm the chief executive and one of the 3 founders of Thriva. I'm not a clinician. Very important to point that out at the front of this conversation. But a sort of product-focused entrepreneur by background. And I got into the realm of diagnostics and preventative health for reasons I won't bore you with now, but certainly have my personal motivations for launching Thriva. So Thriva, as a company, is here to help people find out what is really going on inside their bodies much more easily and to understand what that information means for them and what they can do about it. The realization being that the vast majority of people don't know what's going on inside their bodies, the vast majority of the time. We started off as a direct-to-consumer brand, and we now are both B2C and B2B, recognizing post-pandemic that the big asset that we developed was the underlying platform that integrates all of the elements of the diagnostics ecosystem to provide omni-channel diagnostics to third-party partners, from insurers to CROs to pharmacies on the high street.
Great, thank you. Adham?
Yeah, once more, thanks again for inviting me and listening to us today. My name is Adham. I'm the CEO of Selfapy. I am actually a pharmacist by training, but I worked as a pharmacist for a very limited time, so I would also not consider myself a clinician or having that insight as a clinician or a doctor or actually a pharmacist who's working in the field right now. I've been in the digital health field for the last 10 years. I've been in kind of different companies, different fields. But where I am right now is Selfapy, as I mentioned. Selfapy is a startup, a Berlin startup that is focusing on mental health. As you probably all know, mental health is a topic that is having quite a big unmet need globally, not just in one part of the world. We see that patients or people who need the help needs to wait for quite some time. In big cities, that can be 5 months just to get access to a therapist. In, I would say, remote areas, that can go up to 8 months or even a year. And this is where Selfapy was founded with the vision and the mission to have no patients or nobody waiting to get access to the help that they need. And on top of this, one big part of accessing help is to also overcome the barrier of affordability. And that's why since the beginning, Selfapy has focused on getting also reimbursement, or that patients don't have to pay for the product or the therapy themselves, but that they can have this reimbursed by their insurance. And that's why we are today one of the leading companies in the reimbursement scene in Germany. So I don't know if you heard about DiGAs, but we today have DiGAs, or what is reimbursed products, in 5 indications in Germany today, all for mental illness indications, so like depression, anxiety, and other indications as well.
Great, thank you very much. And I'll also do a quick intro about myself. I'm Klaus Boehncke. I'm a digital health lead at L.E.K. I've probably been around healthcare, I'd say, for the past 25 years or so in consulting, and also led a venture capital company at one point. So I do know about the pains of startups and the difficulty of penetrating new markets and getting funding and doing everything at the same time. I've lived in, spent quite a bit of time in Asia Pacific, about 10 years of my life, then returned to Europe 5-6 years ago. And maybe a few words about L.E.K. Who's L.E.K. Consulting? We have about 2,000 staff globally, and nearly half of our business is really focused on healthcare. And we work with clients in the healthcare services space, in the life sciences space, and also do quite a bit of work with investors. So that's just a bit about me and about L.E.K. So let's dive into the topic of the day, customer retention, which is really defined as the ability to keep your customers returning to you over a certain period of time. And one of the interesting aspects that we've seen in our studies that we've looked at globally is that you have around, for every sort of given year, you have around 15 to 25% of patients that are actually not happy with the experience that they have in the healthcare system. And that could be because of difficulty of access. You mentioned long waiting times. It could be difficulty even to book an appointment. It could be difficulty to get data. It could be difficulty to interact with the healthcare provider, or the choice that you have and the ability to get care, or the quality. So a number of reasons. And that leads to a relatively high churn rate of around 15%, depending on which studies you look at and which country you look at, and how much choice people actually have in the system to change providers. To relatively high churn rate of about 15%. That's around where it is with your internet provider or a mobile phone service. So it's not a small number. So I guess, we'll be talking today about what you can do to lower that churn rate, actually. So maybe beginning just in terms of the first question, can you tell us a little bit how you actually define customer retention and the user base in your company, and what you're doing to have people come back? And I think for both of your value propositions, it's actually an interesting question, because you have, I suppose, and you can, please comment on that, a high number of episodic customers, right, that have a mental health episode, that might have an episode where they require a diagnostic test. And the other aspect I just wanted to touch on as well is you also have your consumers as customers, and you also have business customers. You have your insurance customers, for example. You have the diagnostic platform customers, and how you differentiate, I guess, between the experience in the B2C field and the B2B field, right?
Yeah, I think it's important probably to start by shattering one very obvious heuristic, which is that patients aren't people and they're not consumers. And I think we probably are in a fortunate position where everyone in this room kind of gets that intuitively. The problem historically, and it's frankly much to our advantage, is that we're up against a very low bar in terms of the quality of consumer or people experience within healthcare. So what actually practically are we doing to get people to engage in, to keep coming back? On the direct-to-consumer side, it's very straightforward, right? If you think about what happens when you go and get a diagnostic test almost anywhere around the world, either you get nothing back, and the doctor sort of interprets it for you, or you get a PDF with some completely unintelligible numbers on it. So we lift the bar to 99%, as you probably would hope for a tech startup. What does it mean? Is it intuitive? Do I know exactly how this impacts me personally? Do I know what I can do with that information? So we're also starting to solve the problems that we find. So we're now CQC registered. We can do prescribing. We can do consultations to sort of close the loop. So that's a big driver. On the B2B side, look, the reality is that a clinical trial operator may or may not want the end participant to receive the information. So the heuristic flips a little bit, and really what they care about is the quality of the experience. So the customer in that sense is a B2B customer for us, and the participant is the person that needs to ensure that their information is being handled sensitively and securely, so that our B2B customer ultimately sticks around. So the caliber of the end-to-end platform, the robustness, our ability to evidence that we can deliver very high quality of service for B2B partners is huge. And sometimes it becomes very important that the B2B customers who are going to be presenting information to their customers, take pharmacies, for example, where we're powering pharmacies to provide diagnostic services to their customers. Really, we just leverage what we've learned in B2C to be able to provide a very high caliber of service that we know people engage with, B2B2C, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Adam?
Yeah, I think the topic of retention is something that I personally struggled with for quite some time. I mean, when you go to especially a digital company, you often land on retention and think of time that a user would be in the product. And one of the things I liked a lot about actually the topic of this panel is the point of beyond the product and the focus on the customer experience. Because at least how we define retention is we did not start from time, but we rather started from what part of the journey or where in the journey, and also why does a user, a patient, start generating value and how. And from that part, we started thinking, then how can we bring them to that point again and again and again? And funny enough, in some instances, that generation of value at that point might be that they should not be coming to the product. So that there is a lot of points where you think nudging the patients or the users too often or a lot to come back to the product is actually taking value. It is actually not a positive thing. It might be negative. There's a lot of discussions also about alarm fatigue and notification fatigue and so on. And this is actually something that it took some time to define what that means to us. And speaking of customer experience, I'm not sure how everyone here know about the whole DiGA process or the process of getting reimbursed for a digital therapeutic in Germany, but it's really beyond the product. So a patient would need to first get informed about that basically they need a product. So let's take Selfapy as an example. A patient who has depressive symptoms would need to go to a doctor first. So they would need to look for an appointment, find a doctor, get to them, get a diagnosis, and then a prescription. The doctor, for example, of course, needs to know that there is a possibility that they prescribe a digital product. And then they give that to the patient. It doesn't stop there. The patient needs to go back to their insurance, find a way that they need to send them that prescription, and then wait for an average, at least what we see, of 2 to 4 weeks to get from the insurance a code. And that the code is that they get to access the product at the end. So we're talking about an experience or a journey of a month or even more sometimes for a patient just to get access to the product that they initially wanted to. And then they start their journey into the product. And through this journey, there's a lot of pitfalls. There's a lot of positive and I would say mainly negative. So it's very important, and that's what we realized, is retention does not only start from the point when the patient actually or the user gets into the product, but how can we solve the complexity that is imposed by the system that we are operating in? because we focus very, very much on reimbursement and that we need to take that affordability barrier from the patients. But that came with, of course, first we have now a new stakeholder, a major stakeholder, which is a doctor, because that's the gatekeeper. We need to ensure that we overcome this, or we enable that that's not a barrier, or that it's not a problem for the patient, and also take the complexity of how the patient, even after the prescription, will get to be getting this code and all this long journey, and how can we get them in very fast. So for us, retention is how to retain the potential, not even the customer, the potential customer, to go through all of this without losing them, even before they access the product, and afterwards, how to bring them back again.
Maybe just to follow up, Adam, at what point do you then get in touch with the customer, right? Because it almost seems like you're at the end of that like month-long process where you don't even know that this is a potential customer. Is that correct?
To be honest, it started that way. So it started that we only kind of got to know that there's a customer, that there's a patient, a potential patient that will be using our product only when they came to us. But as the whole retention topic is a very fluid topic, so you would basically be going to the market, watching what is going on, going back and doing something more. And what we started doing is that we started looking into how to get in contact with the patient or with the potential customer earlier. So for example, we, and I think most companies now are doing the same thing, launched a prescription service. You will see most of the companies do this. And in that service, we basically tell the patient, instead of being completely confused how to get your prescription redeemed for a code, which what contact information that you need to go to get to the insurance, how to send it to them, when to receive it, and so on. We said to the patient, just come to us, give us your prescription, we'll take care of the rest. We will go to your insurance, we will figure it out, we'll get you that code and get you access into the product immediately. So we ensure that they don't kind of get lost, because nobody knows the number of how many patients get kind of like drop out in that process, but there is, let's say, out of experience or talking with doctors and the number of prescriptions that they issue, there is actually an expectation of almost 50% churn in that process alone. Wow. So we try to launch services that actually are out of the product, out of our core focus on the product, just to make sure that we do not lose patients along the way.
And Hamish, how does that work with Thriva? If I look at the consumer side of your business, is it a similar complex process, or is it through telemedicine providers? How does it work? How do people know about you? And then how does that whole experience journey with your services begin?
So, I mean, we effectively have three models in the business. We have a direct-to-consumer brand, we have B2B2C providers, and we have B2B providers. With the direct-to-consumer brand, it is a fairly traditional mix of D2C acquisition channels, candidly. There's nothing particularly remarkable about that. On the B2B2C side, it is a bit of a combination of the two. We often find that the B2C brand is the reason that people know about us in the first place, but they are a intermediary or distributor of some kind, and they come to us as a consequence of that being true. And on the B2B side, very often it's us either reaching out to them or them to us, because they've got a very specific need within the diagnostics realm that they can't fulfill themselves. So it is very, very different. And the articulation of value ultimately is more common than it is different, but it is obviously tuned depending on the use case. So on the retention side, I mean, it's been talked about already, and actually, you know, we have a very similar ongoing debate about what too much interaction with the technology looks like. And we work very, very hard to tie value to value. So what is the moment of exchange? When do the people that really matter? Sometimes there are two parties because there's an intermediary that needs to care. Sometimes it's just one party if it's the individual engaging directly. When do they have the aha moments, and how do you dial that up in reaching more people?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think to me, one of the core elements of driving a great customer experience is always having a very fast feedback loop. So you listen to what customers are telling you, or you look at the data and see what they're doing. and then you try to enhance it with kind of the next iteration of your product and service. And you mentioned that just now, right? In terms of saying this is a really cumbersome process and we don't really know how many people we lose, so we try to integrate these other services. But can you say a little bit how you've organized yourselves to rapidly improve on customer feedback? In terms of listening and then maybe developing a next version of your product and continually kind of innovating?
I was very fortunate that I was in fintech for 5 years before I started Thriva, and we sort of watched as some of the very large incumbents had strips torn off them by the likes of Monzo and Revolut and TransferWise and others, and we basically copied a number of the strategies that they were deploying at the time. So building, beta testing communities, getting people into the office, giving them pizza and beer more often than not, and putting the customer at the heart of everything that we ultimately try to do. Someone on the panel previously, I'm going to be a bit barbed. I really disagree with what they gave by way of advice. They said start with a product. I think you should start with a customer. That, to me, feels like the right thing to do because there are a hell of a lot of solutions, in particular, ironically, in health and well-being, that are solutions looking for a problem to solve, as opposed to knowing that there is a problem with a solution that's well-tuned to it. So, yeah, we have beta releases, customer involvement, pre-release. We survey constantly. We've put into the product direct feedback opportunities so people can kind of grade the quality of different feature components within the experience. So yeah, I mean, it's never enough. I think that's the reality. But we probably operate like most tech companies, and we try as hard as we can.
And maybe just following up on that, how often would you say your user journey interfaces or any other feature is updated? Is that like every 6 months? Is it every month? Is it once?
Oh God,
a
no,
year,
yeah. I mean, it's every time we do a release, which is every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks. No. Thank you. Great. Is that the same with Selfapy?
No. I think the downside of being a medical device is you're very limited on the amount of change that you're able to do without quite a lot of let's say regulatory requirements that you need to fulfill. So there is a certain threshold for the change or the size or the significance of the change that you can do in a product, after which this needs to go through a long process of re-evaluation of the product and so on. So we do changes we do release monthly, but it will be usually small improvements, but not a complete change of the experience. But that's only when you look into the product. And I think that when you look into the customer experience overall, that kind of goes beyond that. Mm-hmm. But I think to come to your question on how we kind of incorporate the customers, I think my own learning, because I had a lot of, let's say, like a long journey of how to understand how to do this. I think my own experience and my own learning is how can you find a way to actually involve the customer in the development. Mm-hmm. And this is not it's easier said than done, but that was, to me, in my opinion, was the best way to do that, to actually get to leverage customer experience for retention and actually build an experience that is fitting for the needs of the customer. In my previous company, and I'm only mentioning this because I think that's a good example. We actually, I was working in a digital startup in the diabetes area called My Sugar, and we had the entire basically mission, even as part of the hiring strategy, to have at least 20 to 25% of the employee with diabetes. So that was actually a plus point when we are looking into hiring into the company. And the idea for this was we basically had always the statement that it's a product that is built for people people with diabetes and by people with diabetes. And the rationale behind it is like we wanted to do as much as we can, not only for reaching out to customers, but even those that are developing the product, those that are developing the experience in all functions, know how it is to live with the condition. It's a bit difficult right now in the mental health field because of the stigma around it, that you cannot basically know or ask or get people with mental illnesses. That's a bit difficult from kind of the topic. But that is something that we find different ways. So we kind of keep an open door to how to get as much feedback, as much involvement from any patient who would be interested to give us their experience and where the pinpoints are and how did they see or how did they experience the entire journey. And how could we involve them, not just in give us feedback, but that we can go back to them and say, okay, we have this idea to solve your pain or to address the need that you have. What do you think? Or we have these 2, 3 options. Which one do you think would be the best?
Can I just riff a little bit on what Adam was saying? I think the one thing that I was just reflecting on, what does sometimes go wrong in the sort of collection of feedback, certainly in our experience, there is a real risk, and thankfully one of my co-founders is he's a real tonic to this risk. When you look at NPS, obviously the weighting of NPS gears very heavily to negative reviews. And it's very easy to get sucked into the rabbit hole of a very, very small number of very, very vocal customers who are having a woeful experience. And my experience with those customers, it's almost never going to be possible to satisfy them. And you can tie up, and I have done, erroneously, hours of time trying to figure out how to solve their problems. And actually, the honest reflection is you're better off not listening to them in the way that you necessarily evolve the product, but it's very important to know that they exist. So one of the things that we've done is we've integrated a Slack channel to our feedback channels so that we can see, and everyone in the entire company is on that channel, so you can see on a dynamic basis what's coming through. Now, the good thing is that providing you've got more positive than negative reviews, you very quickly get the context of what's positive and negative in totality. And that, I think, is actually really, really important.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I remember from some work I did a while ago that I think only about 5% of customers really complain. Most others just say, okay, I've had bad experience, I'm going to go somewhere else next time, or I'm not going to just reuse this service. Social media now makes it easier to share complaints, so perhaps the 5% number is now going up.
I think it depends a lot on the field. We see it's much more difficult for example, a depressed patient to be motivated enough to speak up.
Yeah.
I think it's 5% maybe for those who are motivated enough to speak up. There is probably more complaints and more customers out there who have something that they would like to be improved. But there's only a few that will be willing to go the extra mile and reach out to you or use one of your channels and actually give you that feedback.
Yeah.
And this percentage will differ depending on the type of customer that you're dealing with.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just looking a little bit at the time, so maybe just jump to one final question, then maybe we can take some audience questions as well. I just wanted to mention kind of the elephant in the room around artificial intelligence, the hype that's been created around generative AI. Maybe in wrapping this thing up, do you see potential with generative AI to help in retention? Is it something that you've looked at in your respective companies? How do you think that will potentially develop in the future? I don't know who wants to go first. Hamish?
Yeah, look, I think for the 800th time this conference, the answer is what can it do that we can't do easily otherwise? And the reality is, I think in most of our fields, to some degree or another, it's all about personalization and relevance. It's very, very difficult for us to be able to tailor anything historically, as well as generative or big, large language models will unlock. So we very much see that there is an opportunity to do that. I think, actually, ironically, back to something that Ben was talking about, the regulatory landscape, I think, will be the major constraining factor there. So whilst the total of our product, unlike Ben's, is not regulated, there are elements that are. So we are a software medical device in 2 or 3 parts of what we do. And of course, it's those areas where actually using AI would enable us to do it quicker, cheaper, faster, better. It would be more personalized. The insights would be richer. Will that drive engagement? Yeah, almost certainly, and therefore retention. But how do you evidence to a regulator that's very much in catch-up mode that it's safe, and you can ultimately lift the lid on something that is relatively closed from their perspective at the moment?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, Hamish took my answer about personalization.
All right.
But I think that when I think about it, today we don't have AI elements in the product, but we hear a lot that only digital is not enough, especially for people with mental illnesses. They would like to have more personal contact. So that's why also we say it's not the intention to replace a therapist. We are only there to help fill the gap that exists in the healthcare right now, in the healthcare system, where there's no access to therapy. So I feel that this could have actually a negative effect in some part, but I fully agree on the use of AI in the individualization of the experience. There is a lot of things that can be done to understand the needs of every patient, because they are very different. What every patient comes to our product, what they are looking for, and what are the pain points that they have, and how can we tailor the experience to kind of fit or address that need, and not just crowd it with everything that might be possible. Definitely that will drive retention up and make the experience much better. And I think the second thing that we are looking into as well is how could we optimize the development process? So away from the experience, there are a lot of applications of AI in the development process that can optimize it a lot, that can make it much more cost efficient, that we're currently looking into as well.
Yeah, us too. I think there was something published last week or the week before that Shopify have effectively written 1 million lines of code using Copilot already. Whether that's prompted and edited or just done, TBC. Have to ask Shopify that. But it was interesting to note that the cat is very much sort of out the bag in driving efficiency into the software development cycle.
Yeah. Thank you. So we got about 3.5 minutes left. Any questions from the audience? Doesn't look like it, so...
We can use this time for the discussion.
There's a question back there.
Oh. There is my colleague with the microphone.
He's running around.
Give him 10 seconds.
Hi, Sander Rudberg, working for Novartis. How do we personalize the level of engagement when we think of really longer term? So people who we're looking to retain in those outlying years, thinking more 5 to 10 years. And how do we find the right balance between wanting to engage them versus their need to just live their lives?
I'd love to take a swing at this because we are hoping to do some work with Novartis almost on this very topic. So, I think ultimately it comes down to a lot of what has been said already, right? You need to acknowledge that there is a tipping point over which you should not go because it starts to assume something about the human condition that is patently not true. Ironically, I don't wear a smartwatch. I have most of the notifications on my phone off. I don't really use social media. I'm quite anti-technology. So I come at this from a just the right amount, please perspective. I'm not a technology maximalist in that respect. So I think a very easy way into the answer is what would be valuable to the patient and therefore appropriate to deliver. So if you look at something like drug development, at the moment, either the accompanying diagnostic during the trial process or after the trial is concluded, you're kind of into real-world evidence gathering. What does good look like? And at the moment, the answer, and I'm answering this very much kind of from the Thriva framework, is it's incredibly frustrating for a person, kind of no longer a participant because they've rolled off the trial, to access if you like, the sort of the biological implications of what's been going on. Yeah, you can survey them, but wouldn't it be better to find out what's really happening inside their bodies? And that's just a question of cadence, type of test, cost, and then using that information to sort of play back into the treatment development in totality. So yeah, it's just, it kind of comes back to value exchange, right? What would someone who is taking a medication themselves find valuable over a 3, 5, 10-year horizon, knowing that maybe they can titrate their dose more effectively, maybe they can find a drug that might work more efficiently or more effectively. They probably are up for doing something, whether that's engaging in a software interaction or possibly collecting some diagnostic samples themselves.
Maybe just to add there, as a patient with a chronic disease myself, I actually feel like much of the healthcare system is based on my pull. So I basically have to go get a cardiology checkup, and then the cardiologist will tell me to get a blood test. So there's, I think, room for longer-term engagement with patients with chronic disease on a more outgoing basis, to say, yes, we've done tests for you. Would you like to do this on a regular basis? These type of things. I think in most healthcare systems, it really, you have to be a smart patient or you get lost, and nobody ever touches base with you to check in.
Yeah, if I may add, I think the point about personalization to get retention, I cannot speak about 5 to 10 year retention, but at least to prolong this as far as it's needed, will come from the understanding that the whole journey that we always talk about in all the different companies, the customer journey or the patient journey, is not one. It's really a lot. It's like every patient has a specific set of needs or points from the journey that they want to look into, and the rest is just crowded. And I think individualization is to very, very early on understand the profile or the persona or that patient and what are they looking for, and very quickly tailor this journey to their needs. So they are not actually deferred by the crowdness or the noise around it. And it can be, as you mentioned, too much notification. I mean, just taking one example from the diabetes field, I remember that was the holy grail was to make this artificial pancreas, which in essence is to just have a patient with diabetes or a person with diabetes not knowing anymore or not thinking anymore about the fact that they have diabetes. So just that their sensor talks to their pump and everything's just working, and then they don't even know what is going on there. They're just completely out of it. And I think it's not about having more use. It's about understanding what the value for them is, exactly like you mentioned, and just focus mainly on that or individualize their entire experience around it. And I think that can be done very well with individualization or personalization of it and using different tools, be it AI or any other type of tool that can be used.
Thank you so much. I think we're out of time, right? So thank you, Hamish. Thank you, Adam.
Thanks very much. Thanks for coming, everyone.
To the audience for sticking with us.
Thank you.
Applause for gentlemen. Thank you very much for this interesting discussion. Thank you, of course, Klaus, for moderating it.